Hello viewers, my name is Damilari. In this lesson, we'll be looking at the topic respiratory system. Anytime you hear a system has to do with connection of two or more things. For example, when you say computer system, it means it has a monitor, it has a keyboard, it has mouse. That's why we call them a system. So if we say respiratory system, it means is the combination of different organs. And what are these organs doing? They will do specific function. What is that specific function? They will break. And what are they breaking? Glucose. Glucose is the product of carbohydrates, that's representing food. So meaning they will break food. And that breaking down will take place in the cell, and there will be series of reactions going on as they are breaking. So they will be controlled by some enzymes that will make it very fast so that they can release the energy where it is needed, so that different activities can be carried out in the living organism. In respiration, oxygen is what we breathe in for respiration to take place. That means for food to break down and for energy to be released. And if oxygen is taken in, then carbon dioxide will be released. Water is another byproduct. In some cases, we have alcohol or lactic acid being released as the product. And that one is when oxygen is not involved in the respiration. They call it anaerobic. That means no oxygen. Now let's move to stages of respiration. We have external, we have internal. External is the breathing. The way we breathe in air, breathe out air. We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. That's external. For internal, they call it tissue instead of breathing. So tissue respiration, and that's the one I've explained earlier about how the glucose will be broken down to produce energy. So the food substances which represent the glucose, so it will be broken down to release energy, and that will take place inside the mitochondria, the powerhouse of cell. So that's where they'll be breaking the glucose to produce energy. And take note, the energy of food was potential. So it was potential not until it turns to kinetic. That means it begins to work in our body. Okay, so the chemical equation for respiration is here, talking about the glucose, how it will be broken by oxygen. So the product will be water and carbon dioxide, and there will be energy. And take note of the formula that there is 6 oxygen, 6 water, 6 CO2. That's 6 cc's for the smaller substances, apart from glucose that is large. So another thing, we have respiratory structure. That means what does the organ that is doing the respiration, what does it look like? What is it doing? So we have said about how it will take in oxygen and how it will take out carbon dioxide. That's the way they have designed it. What are now the characteristics of respiratory organs? That means those things we are using to breathe. What are the things they have that make them fit for that respiration? One, their surface area is large so that it can accommodate diffusion. It can allow air to be going out, coming in, because it's large, just like a large balloon. A large balloon will accept enough air. Number two, it must be moist. So that means where we are using for respiration, for breathing or for breaking down, so that place must be moist, because the oxygen we breathe in, the gas, must see moisture in your respiratory organ, so that once it's there, the gas will now dissolve and can easily flow to the necessary destination. Number three, the respiratory surface is supplied with a large number of blood capillaries. Blood capillaries must be enough. Why? Because that's where the oxygen will be passing to the blood. So oxygen must go to the blood. It's the blood that have to supply every part of the body. So meaning that this particular source is very important. That means where the oxygen is coming from. So there must be a large number of capillaries that will be pumping blood or using the blood to move the oxygen. Another thing about the respiratory organ is that there is a thin layer between that blood capillary and the respiratory surface. Why? So that the distance will not be too far. The blood can easily get to a destination since it's just a thin layer between them. Number 5, it must be permeable. That means it will permit, since it's oxygen and carbon dioxide that is passing, it must permit them so that it will not just be there. So number 6, another thing the respiratory organ must do, it must have adequate supply of transport medium. Enough blood must come there because they are the one that will package the oxygen from that place. So now the next thing we'll be looking at will be different organisms and their respiratory structures. Looking at these organisms, unicellular organisms that has one cell, like amoeba, paramecium. So what do they use for respiration? Just use that letter U. Remember, there is a bank, they call it UBA. So from the U, unicellular organism, they will use their body surface, that's UB. The hydra and tapeworm, you can use H and T, then you say high tech, just like high technology. I and T, then K, letter C. The C means the hydra and tapeworm can be used. They respire with their cell membrane for letter C. The earthworm, you take the W and the M. That means the wet or moist skin. Then the fish, what do they use for respiration? From federal government, it means fish for federal, government for gills. Arthropods, like insects, what do they use? From the I and the S, then T and the S. So meaning that from the I and S we have spiracles. So it means insect we use spiracles. Then T and S, use it to remember tracheal system. So that's what they use. Then arachnids, like spiders. When you look at spider, you can use the word spade to remember. A spade has a long handle. So that long handle, use it to remember long book. Spider will use long book for respiration. Then tadpole, that's the baby of all these amphibians that live on land and in water. So the baby will always stay in the water, so meaning that it needs the gills, just like fish. So use it to remember T and G, just like tiger. Then for amphibian, now the adult of the tadpole, that one can use the mouth, which we call the buccal part. So it can use the mouth for respiration. It can use the gills to respire inside the water. It can use the lungs on land. So that is and take, as I said, the mouth is the buccal, then the skin, so we call it cutaneous. It can use cutaneous. Now mammals, reptiles, apes, all these ones, they use lungs for their respiration because most of them are majorly on land. Then flowering plants, they use stomata, so FS. So flowering plants, they use stomata for their respiration. So there are different questions under this place that you can check and answer yourself. Now let's move to mechanisms of respiration in insects. How is insects, how is it respiring? How is it breathing? We have talked about spiracle tracheal system. So they always use their words, trachea, that's the insect, and that trachea is like a branched tube. So it's a branched tube. When you say branched tube, something facing either left or right. So assuming this is the insect now, it has a trachea. So and that trachea is for respiration, which is a branched tube. And this same branched tube, it extends to the internal, it enters inside internal organs and tissues of the body. So and it opens through the spiracle. That means both the trachea and the spiracle, they have opening. So that is just for the insects, using the tracheal system and the spiracles from the inside to the outside. And there is also a muscle, they call it abdominal muscle, that these insects can be using. They will contract and they will relax. So for relaxing and for contracting. Now the next one is mechanism of respiration in fish. How does fish respire? The first thing is that they make use of their gills. So when the gill covers, there's something called gill cover, which is operculum. So when the gill cover, or you say the gill plate, so when you close them, assuming this is the fish now, so this fish, there is something here that when you open it, you will see gills there. So this place you are opening is the gill cover. So when you close it, the mouth is open. So you see the mouth of the fish opened like this. So why this place will be closed, the gill cover, so it will the gill cover will be closed, so but the mouth will be open. Why? So that water can enter, and it will make sure its mouth is lowered so that water can rush into that mouth through. Then when the mouth is now closed, the gill covers will now be opened, so the mouth will now close, then the gill cover so will now be opened. Why? So that the water can have a place to flow out. So water flows out through the gill opening. So but before the water goes out, it would have baited the gill filament. So it will have done the baiting of the gill filament. Gill filament is just part of the gills. When you draw your gills like this, so the filaments are just part of these gills. So that is how the fish is using the gills. So as water flow over those gill filaments, there is gaseous exchange. Oxygen dissolved in water will diffuse into the blood of the capillary. So another one is respiratory system in toad. How does toad respire? So we have said they can use skin, they can use mouth, they can use lungs. So let's look at how do they use their skin. So anywhere there is wet, that means that is moist. So that is where the skin will be easily used for respiration, because they always release something in form of mucus, so that the respiration can easily take place there. So that's for the toad. So toad in a moist place, and through the fluid they release, so in their skin. Now gaseous exchange through the mouth or buccal cavity. It means they can also open their mouth, or the toad lowers the lower of its mouth and opens the nostril. So they can bring their mouth down, open their nostril, and air will be drawn into the large mouth cavity. So following the what? The nostril. Now the surface of the mouth cavity is moist and mucous membrane lining. So the mouth is supplied with numerous blood capillaries. So gaseous exchange will take place between the air in the mouth and the blood in the capillaries. So it means there is a connection between the mouth and the capillaries. Now we also have human lungs and some mammalian lungs. So how do they respire? So the toad, so okay, this one is still the lungs of the amphibians. So the toad, they always close the glottis. Now, so they close the glottis. Glottis is just a part that is always separating. So it's a part that is always separating the passage of food from the passage of air. So the toad closes the glottis, opens the nostrils, and lowers the mouth. And lowers the floor of its mouth. So that's if they want to respire, if they want to breathe. So air will now enter through their nostril into their mouth. So then the toad can now close the nostril, open the glottis, raise the floor of the mouth. So an air then passes into the lungs. So that is that for their lungs. So these are still more questions so related to the topic. So finally, we want to use human respiration as a case study before we round up. So for human has what we call lungs, which is going to use for respiration. Land animals exposed to the atmosphere, they have dry body coverage. So gaseous exchange cannot occur through such surface. Any surface that is dry, so gaseous exchange cannot take place there. Okay, this is the structure of the respiratory system. This is the nose. Outside is nose, but the passage is called nasal cavity. That means where air will pass. Then this is also mouth. So both the mouth and the nasal cavity. So these two, they work together, nasal cavity and mouth. So it means as air is entering nasal cavity, air can also enter the mouth. Then there is a meeting point here called pharynx. So pharynx is the first meeting point here. So now from that pharynx, if you come down a bit, you see a covering here called epiglottis. So this epiglottis is one that will prevent food from entering the trachea. Then another part we have here is larynx. So larynx is also very small, is smaller, and then it's we can also call it voice box that give us our voice. Then we have rings of cartilage. That means all these rings of cartilage, so they call them, they are part of the trachea. That means the rings are the part of the trachea. Now another part of this respiratory system is ribs. So it means there are ribs for respiration. So these are the ribs. All these circle represent bones. So that's respiratory system. So that's for the ribs. Then if you still go inward, because as you are coming down from the nostril here, the trachea here, the branches here, we now have bronchi. That means bronchus here. Then after the bronchi, we now still have bronchioles coming down, up, and then front. So these are bronchioles. Now apart from those bronchioles, then we also have the alveoli, or alveolus. So alveolus, they are these tiny things that are in between the bronchioles. And what is their work? They are doing the major work in lungs. These alveolus, they are the one exchanging gases. That means they will bring in oxygen and they will take out carbon dioxide. So that's the work of alveolus. They exchange their gases. So, and we have said this round surface is lung. So, and then this middle here is a space for hearts. So hearts can easily stay here. So that's it. Then underneath it is diaphragm. So that's like a bone. So under it, so that's the diaphragm. Now we have mentioned the different parts of the respiratory system. We mentioned nose and mouth. So nose, we should take note, it has two air passage, and we call that nostril, where air will be passed, and there is a lining inside that nostril that can secrete mucus. So it can secrete mucus, can come out from the nose. So, and it will now, that mucus will keep the nose moist. So, and that nostrils, they have air or filtering. It means they can filter. That means they can try to remove dirty things. That's the meaning of filtering. So they can remove dirty. So that's for the nose. So nose is doing the work of passage of air, is doing the work of moisturing the nose, is doing the work of filtering air, because there is air inside it. So then for pharynx, so pharynx it continues from the mouth and the nose. That means it's just the meeting point of the mouth and the nose, so leading to what we call oesophagus. That's from the pharynx, so it leads to the oesophagus. And that's why you can be using the the full sound as food. So because the pharynx leads to the esophagus. Now another one is larynx, which we call voice box. Any voice, any sound you make, so as a result of the larynx. So meaning that larynx is actually short and made of strong cartilage. So because there will be a kind of movement every time. Then bronchi, they are made of rings and cartilages. So we have rings and cartilage, as I've shown you earlier, that they have rings. So the rings are there. Then the right and left bronchi branches into bronchioles. So that means the division of bronchi, under it we have bronchioles. So the next one, lungs. So lungs is always spongy, and we can see mainly bronchioles, air sacs, network of blood vessels, so inside the lungs. Now another one is now mechanisms of breathing in man. That means when man is breathing, we have what we call inhalation, is breathing in. We have exhalation, is breathing out. So while this is taking place, what are the things that will also accompany this? So let's start with what? Inhalation. That's what? Breathing in. So breathing in, that's inhalation, or you call it inspiration, breathing in. So during this period of inspiration or inhalation, the thoracic cavity, take note of all those things. Number one, the thoracic cavity will increase. It will increase in volume. Just imagine you breathe in. So as you breathe in, what did you notice? The bone in your chest, called thoracic, it will also increase, it will go up. That's number one. The diaphragm will contract. The diaphragm, that's the bone that is under, the one that is carrying the lungs. So it's going to contract. So it will contract, it will stretch. That's the meaning of the contract, to stretch. And as it stretches, it will now become flat. It will now become flat. So from something like this to something like this. So it means it will stretch it out. Okay, so that's for the thoracic. We say it will increase. The diaphragm, we say it will contract, then become flattened. So it will become flattened. Then we also have intercostal muscle. That one will contract. So intercostal, the way diaphragm will contract and become flat, that's how the intercostal muscle will also contract. It's like trying to force out some things, trying to inflate balloon. So there must be a contraction. So while the ribs, those ones will just move upward and outwards, upwards and outwards. So these are the things that will be happening during inhalation. So number one, we said the thoracic cavity will increase. Number two, the diaphragm will contract and become flat. Number four, the intercostal muscle contracts while the ribs move upwards and outwards. So that's what intercostal muscle does. Then as the sternum projects forward, there is an increase in the volume and decrease in the pressure of thoracic cavity. Now we move to what we call exhalation. In exhalation, that means we are breathing out. So the intercostal muscle, they will now relax. Exhalation is you are breathing out. When you breathe in, so several things will rise, but when you breathe out, there will be a relaxation. The muscle that went up will now relax. The rib cage that was up will be lowered. The diaphragm that was will become relaxed. So the diaphragm will also relax and return to its original dome shaped position. So meaning that the actual shape was dome shape. That's for the lungs. So it will now return to that dome shape after breathing out. So meaning that it was the breathing in that changed the shape. So another thing, thoracic cavity, that one will now decrease. So then the lung air pressure increases. So the air pressure, so it will increase because it is by force, it will push out the air. So that's why the air pressure will increase, and a lot of air will be expelled from the lungs, so through the air passage. So that is how this respiration works. So we still have the one of animals lower animals, so they also do their respiration. So today we have looked at the topic respiratory system and different organisms that always have their own respiratory system. So that's for today's class. So thanks for listening.